Hi everyone, welcome to Flood Theory. I'm your new host, Stealth. Don't worry about the old one, we're probably still looking for him. So if you're familiar with the Ruins theory, you'll know there's a lot beneath the surface of FE2, namely the destruction of Flood Escape Classic, and the possibility of flood shards being important. Flood shard aura. But what is the story of FE2? Is it the story of someone controlling dimensions for the sole purpose of a minigame? Is it the story of the guide going and killing players for some reason? No. There's darker, there's science, and where there's science, there's people desperate for power, but that's for later date. For now, let's just get familiar with the basics, like Flood Escape Classic, and the escape of the guide, and possibly other survivors as well. So strap in, because we're going back to the new beginning. Flood Escape Classic was a game on Roblox, but also probably represented a place in-universe for people to enjoy. It was similar to an escape room, but for people who were fine with signing waivers that they don't necessarily read. As time went on, the lobby was updated. Metal rusted, bricks were cracked, and the extreme mode was ever closer to being finished. But then disaster struck. We see the aftermath of what is likely a small-scale eruption of the volcano that FE2 sat upon. This is what made the island in the first place, and might indicate FE2 being somewhere near Hawaii or a similar chain of islands or archipelagos in the universe. Either way, it spelled disaster, and the survivors needed to find refuge. Going beneath the ruins, we see Guide and the survivors end up in a small underground area, with black stone topped by a lighter, dustier layer. This, coincidentally, is the same style that the extreme mode and room and cave system are made in. Moreover, the lift at the beginning of cave system has striking similarities to the extreme lift, although newer. So with that, we could possibly assume that Beneath the Ruins ends near the extreme mode, or even one of the lower rooms of it. Perhaps this cave system was discovered when making the third, unfinished room even. Now, but where after that? The cave system seems to lead nowhere after, right? However, when looking at the official soundtracks made for the game, you can note that the OC for Abandoned Facility is the same exact one as the one for Cave System, only with different instruments and a different key. I don't think that's a coincidence. Moreover, a direct connection comes in the form of a security camera in the facility, pointed directly at Beneath the Ruins' ending room. Mind you, the room was filling with lava, so this would have to be a very short time after escaping the ruins. Such as, after exploring the cave system, perhaps the ending floor of cave system collapsed into the abandoned facility, or it was simply not shown that they connect. In there, the guide and the other survivors found air tanks, which supported them as they found some sort of backup controls to open the vents and escape. Obviously, there wasn't the most caution in building this. The architects seemed to not have been very skilled. Either way, the cooling fans in the facility needed to be powering something. But what? Well, here we get into a controversial topic. Community maps. In short, some were added to the game with an update, and some removed. Looking at you, Desert Ruins. Either way, this makes our flimsy canon even less sure. And still, I consider the maps in game to be considered canon. Mind you, maps can always be removed due to controversy, but the game adapts. But, with that out of the way, there is a map that fits perfectly from the community maps. Abandoned Facility's unofficial sequel, Undersea Facility. Yes, they reused the name, we don't talk about that. This map has a few interesting things, such as, for instance, the nuclear power plant that might have supplied energy to Flood Escape, obviously. But, there's a little more to it than that. If you collect the 3 crystal shards, ones I call Ignis shards, a giant red crystal overtakes the zipline, and possibly more after that. A room to the left opens, and a gateway portal opens to a red, fiery dimension, one similar, mind you, to the Ignis dimension, 2 maps of which are added to the game. Keep that in mind for later. But since there are 2 endings, it's not likely that all of them were trapped in this dimension. Perhaps only the slow, or even the curious, were trapped. Perhaps this even allowed for the most well-suited to traverse and explore it. Most, including the guide at the forefront, made it out, though. Now, I have a series of connections I think plausible, being Decrepit Seas, Oceanic Odyssey, and Abyssal Remnants. Looking at the maps, they make sense together. In Decrepit Seas, they had plenty of oxygen, but it started to run out towards the end. In Oceanic Odyssey, they needed to get and share oxygen from some sort of remnants, but a facility at the end helps you supply more. And then in Abyssal Remnants, they have enough to escape the torment of lava up to a lift. Now, but where does this lift lead on to, you might ask? Well, it might take them up to the surface, is what I believe. Where I believe they climbed to get up to Flood Island, one of the earliest memorable maps in the game. Flood Island ends where you would imagine, on a helipad. And from there, though, it's quite unclear where to get. So, what are some interesting things to note? Obviously the Ignis shards. This implies research on the flood shards and an entirely different dimension. More evidence of this would be Abyssal Remnants, which was likely what necessitated the helipad in the first place. It sunk into the depths, however, what was it for? Research? And was it built by the same ones that built Flood Escape and the Undersea facility? The same ones researching the flood shards? Perhaps this is where they originally got the flood shards in the game, because, as Semler notes, we did in fact have them in Flood Escape Classic. But there's also another curious thing. Why was it so secretive? And why would you build it over a volcano, or not know when it is to erupt? If you're scientists, if both of these were true that they knew, why did they not warn the survivors? This implies either a lack of expertise or a lack of care to warn people in the Flood Escape Classic. Guide must have known this, and I'll bet he wanted answers. But where to look?